Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. This thing came out 2 hours ago, and I've had hundreds of comments already of people asking when I'm going to react to this video. So here it is. So we all remember the times the United States and the United Kingdom were at war. The American Revolution in the 18th century. And then there was the War of 1812. And then, of course, we all remember the time that George Pickett, yes, the same George Pickett of Pickett's Charge in Gettysburg, tried to start a war with Britain in 1859. You don't? Well, that's about all I know about the Pig War. I knew that. I know George Pickett was with the 9th Infantry. He was stationed in this area. I believe that George McClellan accused him of trying to start a war with Britain, something that would distract everyone from the impending civil war that was coming by uniting North and South against a common enemy and the Brits across the sea. That's about all I know about the Pig War, so I'm excited to dive into this one today. Join me on the journey.
Is made possible by NordVPN. Click the link below to stay safe online and get a huge discount off a 2-year plan with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Trouble sleeping? Need someone to snuggle? Then why not snuggle me? The limited edition Oversimplified plushie is available for pre-order for a few days only. Get it quick along with some beautiful new character pins.
Thomas Jefferson.
Look at us,
and James Madison, and I think that's James Monroe there.
Boys, we've only gone and bloody done it. We beat the Brits and secured independence. Now to expand westward and conquer the rest of the continent. Thomas? It looks like a bunch of different people already live out west. What? Oh no, that means we can't expand.
So I've talked about this on lots of other videos. There are two overarching themes that define the first 80 years or so of the United States history. It's slavery and manifest destiny. And both of them are going to come into play in what we're talking about today. Manifest destiny, the idea that the United States is meant to own everything from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, you know, California, Oregon, and Washington today. And then, of course, slavery. And those two issues decide foreign policy. They decide much of domestic policy. Really very little major events happen in U.S. history that don't involve one or both of those things.
I hate my life. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't say they were white people.
Oh, boy. Tough but fair.
At the end of the Revolutionary War, when the United States secured its independence from Great Britain, the two sides met in Paris to settle the terms. Among various things, they discussed American territorial gains, and the British granted them a generous amount of land out west.
See, one of the things that doesn't get talked about a whole lot about the Revolutionary War is that the British, in controlling colonial America, had an understanding with the Native Americans that basically they were going to keep all their people, the British were going to keep all their people east of the Appalachian Mountains, which run roughly about right here. And so all of this territory here was for Native Americans only, you know, fur trappers and things like that. But otherwise, that was it. And so one of the goals in winning independence was now, hey, we don't have to abide by what the British agreed to. All of this land's open up, and a lot of the soldiers who fought the revolution were granted huge land grants in places like Ohio and Kentucky and what became Tennessee.
However, Benjamin Franklin appeared to have an additional fascination. Oh, Canada. So voluptuous. You think we can maybe acquire some of that? Quit ogling our territory. But look at those curves. I'd worry less about Canada's curves and more about your own curves, Benjamin.
Oh, roast.
America suggested that one day the Canadian colonies should become a part of the United States. In response, Britain suggested that many in America should shut the hell up. If Britain wasn't going to give up Canada, then the two sides had to agree on where to put their border. Easy enough for the most part. Follow some existing borders, add in a few rivers and lakes, maybe even a parallel for good measure.
And yeah, I mean, this is all Massachusetts at the time. It eventually becomes Maine as part of one of the compromises. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that go on in disputing this border over the years. You can see a lot of it 1842 and even into much later times.
But then there was a question. What would happen here? Straight line, straight line. And so it was. The border would go from the northwesternmost point of this perfectly oval-shaped lake and continue in a straight line westward until it met the Mississippi River. Perfect. Or was it? Well, as it turned out, the lake didn't actually look like this, but like this. And the Mississippi wasn't here, but here. So in the end, none of that made even the slightest bit of sense. Don't blame the founding fathers. They were just using the best map available. Blame the guy who made it. But to the minds of the day, the issue had been solved, and it was finally time to start getting along. Oh, back to war they go. The Glorious War of 1812.
And at this point, Napoleon in France has sold what became known as the Louisiana Purchase to Thomas Jefferson in the United States, doubling the size of the U.S. And of course, it's interesting to sell land that's inhabited by people who aren't part of your country. We've got the Sioux and many other Native American tribes that are inhabiting this land at that time. And you get Lewis and Clark and all that stuff happening.
Saw the Americans try to invade Canada, and the British burn down the White House. But when all was said and done, it was pretty much a draw. And once again, America and Britain had to enter into peace negotiations. By now, both sides realized the original border they came up with was a piece of hot garbage. And since America had also recently obtained a huge amount of land from Napoleon, they decided they would need to re-examine the border issue. Straight line. So it was. To fix the problems of the previous border agreement, they decided to go from the northwesternmost point of this lake, as had been previously agreed, down to the 49th parallel, and from there the line would go straight as an arrow up until the Rocky Mountains. But beyond the Rockies, the two sides couldn't quite agree on where it would go next, because both sides claimed the territory beyond the Rockies was theirs. See, throughout its early history, America as a nation had its eyes heavily fixated on all that juicy land out west.
And you can see why it was a pretty big deal for the U.S. if they could have gotten Canada, because that solves all those problems. Now you don't have the pesky British trying to lay claim to land that you yourself are trying to lay claim to. And then, of course, you have the Spanish down here, and then once Mexico wins independence from Spain, now it's all Mexican territory, and that's going to become a big, big deal. And, of course, again, foreign policy and domestic policy are determined by slavery and manifest destiny, and the Mexican War will involve both of those things.
Ripe for invasion. Settlementation. America wanted to expand. Not only was it their right, some believed it was a destiny given to them by God himself to multiply and spread across the continent, like rats or disease. Okay guys, just before we take over everything, God definitely said this is what we're meant to do, right?
Yeah, that's what he said, right? Isn't that what he said?
And who was it who spoke to God?
It was Billy, right? I thought it was Sharon's cat. I hear voices.
Joseph Smith?
Well, it was one of us. There's no way we made this whole thing up to justify our ruthless collective imperialist tendencies. All right, well, in that case, let's get out there and make the world a better place, just as God intended.
The stealth bombers come in, and McDonald's appears. A lot of this, like the stuff with killing all the bison and stuff like that, and the railroad, actually comes much later than the Pig War.
This belief in divinely destined expansion would later be given its very own name, Manifest Destiny. But America wasn't the only one interested in controlling the Western territories. At the time, Canada was made up of a number of colonies, collectively referred to as British North America. This one over here was owned by the Hudson's Bay Company, a British charter company dedicated to turning as many beavers as possible into as many felt hats as possible, as quickly as possible, and the indigenous people became a key supplier. As a result, the British were also eager to control the land out west and secure that region's valuable resources, and in particular, the Great Columbia River was deemed vital to the beaver business. So when it came to the question of what would happen to the border beyond the Rockies, the conversation went a little like this. The line should keep going straight because we're manifestly destined to gain the entire North American continent. No, we need this river so we can keep scalping beavers. Look, why don't we just draw the border along the river? That way we both have access to it. Well, that would be a completely fair compromise that protects the interests of both parties. And there's no way I'm ever going to agree to it! Having come to a roadblock, both sides simply agreed that for now, they would jointly occupy the Northwestern Territory.
what could possibly go wrong if we share it? You know, just like the U.S. and Native Americans sharing things. What could possibly go wrong? The biggest drawback for the British here is while they've got a strong navy, this is a long distance. I mean, just, you know, from the U.K. across the ocean, you're talking thousands of miles, and then you got thousands more miles to get to the West Coast. It's not like it's really easily accessible to them. Of course, it's not very accessible to much of the United States either, but it's much closer.
They were both free to settle and trade there, but rest assured, the agreement was only temporary. Eventually, somebody would get their way. Listen, Yank, we can jointly occupy this land, but I ain't sharing anything else. I don't want to see you using my toothbrush. I don't want to catch you wearing my underwear. And I don't want to catch you using my computer and selling my data to advertisers.
Oh, here comes an ad.
Well, then you, my friend, should use
NordVPN.
Do you like giving strangers your passwords to your most important online accounts? Me neither. And that's why I use NordVPN. NordVPN has thousands of secure servers in over 60 countries, allowing you to safely surf the net at the fastest speed possible.
By the way, if you, and I'll let the ad run because I should. You know, NordVPN's a great way to watch things that are blocked in your country. So, like, you people that can't see some of the Oversimplified videos because they talk about a guy with a little mustache and things like that, that'll help you with that.
It works across all your devices, so you're protected on the go. Even 6 of them simultaneously. And it's super easy to use. With just a click of a button, you can head on over to South Korea and watch every single BTS video known to mankind. With NordVPN,
why would you do that?
you
Ever?
never need to worry about those shady websites, annoying pop-ups, or undesired eyes spying on your browsing history. And you can even
Mark
content that's been blocked in your
Sexyberg.
country, like this video. It even comes with a 30-day
That's the one I
money-back
just
guarantee.
mentioned.
So why not go to nordvpn.com/oversimplified to get a 2-year plan with a huge discount, plus an additional month for free. And as always, you'll be supporting my channel. So thank you. Now where were we? Oh yeah. Bickering over boundaries, manifesting destiny, and a joint occupation of Oregon.
Terrible
And
idea.
one man living here who felt the territory should be British was James Douglas, the Hudson's Bay Company's no-nonsense chief factor at Fort Vancouver. Ah, what a beautiful, unspoiled corner of the British Empire. I've got my spotted dick, my Spice Girls fan club membership, and an unrelenting negative outlook on life that affects everyone around me. What are you looking at, Steven? Yes, truly British. What the?
What's the boss music? Here comes McDonald's. And I'm just looking around because I know that he likes to put in like characters from previous videos. I don't see any at the moment.
The problem for men like Douglas was that many Americans had already begun streaming up the Oregon Trail. Gunslinging, howdy neighboring, and diarrhea having by the thousands.
You have dysentery. If you're of my generation, you have probably played the game Oregon Trail. There's a new version of it now. But that's like the most memorable thing from the Oregon Trail game is you have died of dysentery. I will never ever forget that, and that'll be a joke for the rest of my life.
They were pouring into the Oregon Territory in search of land to settle and farm. This, however, crowded out the fur trade, and eventually, a very bitter Douglas and the other Hudson's Bay traders at Fort Vancouver were ordered to relocate north to a new base of operations. But the Americans keep coming and they don't stop coming. Hopped in their wagons and they hit the ground running. Didn't make sense to keep sharing Oregon when they outnumbered the Brits more than 6-1. And suddenly, the whole joint occupation deal was being called into question. Newly elected
Who would have thought that that wouldn't work out?
President Polk maintained that America had an obvious claim to the entire region.
And this is the same President Polk who ran on the promise he was only going to serve one term, but he also ran on the promise of annexing Texas, which he knew would probably mean war with Mexico.
Even implying a possible war with Britain. Fiery language from U.S. senators declared that American rifles would annihilate the Hudson's Bay Company in Oregon, and America even gave Britain notice that it was pulling out of the joint occupation agreement. The British were alarmed as the two sides stood on the brink of war. But in the end, neither truly wanted to fight. The British favored maintaining good economic relations, while the Americans had already gotten themselves into a war with Mexico. So after a bit of back and forth, the British finally said, "Fine, you wanted a straight line? There's your straight line." And so, the agreement was made. The border would continue directly to the Strait of Georgia, but because the British insisted they keep Vancouver Island, it would then move south through the center of the channel and on to the Pacific Ocean. Finally, the issue of the northwest border had been solved.
Nope. Nope.
Hold the phone. Discrepancy detected. Enhance frame, 200%. Enhance. Enhance. Nope, too far. Perfect. Now, show me the exact wording of the treaty. The line of boundary goes to the middle of the channel, and thence southerly through the middle of said channel? But there's loads of channels. So, you tell me, dear viewer, which channel is the treaty referring to? And therefore, who owns these islands? Is the wording of the treaty maybe a little too vague? Well, that's exactly the problem encountered by the people living in the area. The British insisted that the channel intended by the treaty was the Rosario Strait, and therefore, the islands were British. The Americans, on the other hand, argued that the intended channel was the Harrow Strait, and therefore, the islands were American. At times, the debate became rather heated. Even the individuals who negotiated and signed the treaty at times didn't seem entirely sure which channel the treaty meant, and representatives from the Hudson's Bay Company begged them to make it clearer. But thousands of miles away, the people in power simply had more to worry about than some tiny islands in the middle of nowhere.
Order! Order! Shut up!
Nice.
All right, listen up. We got a lot to get through. The 7th Earl of Chissingham says he encountered a foul beast in the fields of Upper Fardingdom late last night and put this sketch together? That's a poor person, Darren. Next, Lord Piddlingham says he has a new mole on his backside? How is that parliamentary business, George? Oh, some islands in the Pacific Northwest are in dispute and could lead to a war with America? Boring! Fine, let's take a look at that mole, George. And so, for now, the islands were simply held in dispute. Were they British or were they American? I'm sure this conflict won't cause anyone to die. And one man who thought the islands were undeniably British was James Douglas, now the governor of Vancouver Island. He had already once had American settlers encroach on his territory and force him to move. And by golly, he wasn't going to let it happen again. As far as he was concerned, those islands were not only British, but prime agricultural land. And given the chance, those glubby Yanks wouldn't hesitate to start pitching flags with their glubby little hands.
A little bit reminds me of what happened with the Falklands War, 140 years later or so, where people are kind of arguing over who has the right to the island, and somebody's going to settle on it, and somebody's going to take it from the other one, and that whole bit.
And so, he came up with a plan. If the British settled the islands first, then that would surely secure them for Britain. And so in 1853, Douglas sent an Irishman by the name of Charles Griffin, along with some Hawaiian shepherds, to go set up a sheep farm on San Juan Island. And set up a sheep farm they did. The place was rammed with sheep, 1,369 to be exact. But within those flocks of woolly cowards could also be found a number of beautiful, prized Berkshire pigs. Oh, Porky. You look stunning. You're the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. Would you perhaps like to go to the island ball together tonight? Oink once for no. Roll around in that cow crap if yes. Yes! I'm covered in poo and I'm the luckiest man alive! But life on the island for Charles Griffin wasn't to be a perfect paradise of pig pageants. Because unfortunately for him, the Americans also believed the island was theirs. One day, in 1854, an American customs collector was sailing around the islands on the outlook for bands of native tribesmen when he spotted something. Aha! I've got you now, you savages. Over yonder. Those are sheep, sir. Sheep, you say? What are they doing here? Let's go and negotiate with them. Negotiate with sheep? Are you crazy? I'm perfectly stable, you rat bag. Call me crazy again and I'll eat your eyes! Hello, good sir. We request to speak with your leader.
This reminds me of Saturday Night Live did a skit years ago with Christopher Walken, which some of the funniest stuff they ever did was when he hosted, and it was about a census taker coming and asking him how many people lived in his apartment, and he's like, he says something like 84, and then when they ask him, well, who all lives there, and he starts talking about his cat and a candy bar and a lamp and all this stuff, and same kind of thing here a little bit, talking to the sheep like he's a citizen of the island.
Out of my way. Allow me to parley with this foul beast. Hey, stop threatening my sheep. Your sheep? You mean to tell me that you, a British subject, have illegally imported these sheep into American territory? I'll have you know that you, an American, are currently trespassing on British territory. The Americans felt that they were entitled to collect taxes on the British property, because the island was American, and they threatened seizure if dues weren't paid. The British, meanwhile, threatened to arrest the Americans, because the island was British, and the two sides were in a standoff. To give Charles Griffin the legal power to deal with the American trespassers, Douglas said, "Hey, put on this wig." Boom.
And remember, it's literally weeks, if not months, to transmit messages. I mean, we're talking about the 1850s here, so they don't have any telegraph cables across the ocean yet, so it's still all about. I think the first telegraph cable was in the 1860s. The first one that actually took and lasted was after the American Civil War. So we're still talking about waiting for ships to cross the ocean and back with messages from the government.
You're a magistrate now. And in turn, Griffin went to one of his Hawaiian shepherds and said, "Hey, I'm making you a constable."
So, I mean, and I should clarify that Griffin, he's acting on his own right here, but he's probably also waiting for direction from the government on what to do next.
Put on this badge. The British then went off to arrest the U.S. Customs Inspector. But, being an American, he emerged from his tent with 4 pistols and a giant knife, so the Brits had to back down. Eventually, raids by northern tribes chased the U.S. officer from the island, but the Americans weren't done yet. Officials from nearby Whatcom County in Washington Territory believed the island fell under their jurisdiction, and they decided it was time to make the British pay up once and for all. They sent one Sheriff Barnes to go confront Charles Griffin. "Hey, you owe us $80.
Wait, did that say what I think it said?
Decided it was time to make the British pay up once and for all. They sent one Sheriff Barnes to go confront Charles Griffin. "Hey."
It says boobies upside down. Okay, we did similar things as kids with calculators. It was like a preteen boy thing that you did, I guess.
"You owe us $80.33 for all this farm stuff you got here. Go suck an egg." Oh, I see. So that's how it is, huh? That's how it's gonna be, is it? That's the way in which things are, eh? That be how it will, is it? Will it be how that is, huh? That be the way in which things be the way they are, is that? Get off my property! So the sheriff and other Whatcom County officials felt they were now well within their rights to seize and auction off Griffin's sheep in order to recoup lost taxes. And who would they
escalation
prized breeding rams off to but themselves? Then, in a pretty chaotic scene, they worked to tie the rams to their boats. And when Charles Griffin came running to rescue his kidnapped sheep, being Americans, they pulled out guns on him, and he had to back down. In all, Charles Griffin lost 34 breeding rams, and he was furious. The British complained to the American government, who were shocked to hear what had been going on at their northwest border. And both governments told their officials in the area.
So we got a Mini Cooper here with a British flag on the top of it, and I don't know what kind of car that is, but it's obviously an American one.
To back off. We're not trying to start a major war over some dumb sheep and a stupid island. But also, the islands are definitely ours. Under no circumstances let the other side have them. For now, both governments agreed to set up yet another boundary commission to decide which channel was the correct border. But it often devolved into petty bickering. The British did make one interesting suggestion, though. We could draw the border through this middle channel and split the islands between us. Well, that would be a completely fair compromise.
Which means we'll never do it.
Both parties. And there's no way I'm ever going to agree to it!
And now he's got an AK-47.
The aftermath of the sheep raid, James Douglas, still stationed at Fort Victoria, became even more cautious of American encroachment into his territory. Mr. Douglas, sir. It appears an Indian has discovered gold in the Fraser Canyon, just north of here. Shut up! Keep your voice down, boy.
And these are the kinds of things on which major agreements can fall apart. The same thing happens in 1875-76 when Ulysses S. Grant's administration has come to an agreement with the Sioux Indians, and they're allowing them to have the Black Hills, and everybody thinks that everything's finally settled, and then Prospectors go in, find gold in the Black Hills, and suddenly there's a problem on their hands because they've just agreed to give this land over. And now, suddenly everybody wants the land, and they try to buy the land from the Native Americans, and they don't want to sell the land. And so that's how you end up with the Great Sioux War, which culminates in Little Bighorn, Custer's defeat, those kinds of things, all because somebody found gold.
Boy, we can't risk those glubby Americans hearing about this, or our territory here will be infested with them. Oh no! The Fraser Canyon Gold Rush attracted a heap of Americans to the region. Some got lucky. Most did not. And of those that didn't, rather than returning all the way home, many simply decided to settle in the area. And in particular, the juicy green pastures of San Juan Island were rather appealing. Believing the island was American territory, around a dozen American settlers moved there in the late 1850s. One of them was a man named Lyman Cutler, a young man in his mid-20s, and lazy as pie. He didn't want to have to clear a space in the forest to build his home, so he said, I'll just build my cabin right in the middle of this British sheep run.
Look at all this empty land here. I don't want to have to cut down trees. I can just put it right here.
I'm sure that won't make anyone mad. When he planted potato seeds in his garden, rather than building a nice protective fence around them, he said, I'll just fence in 3 sides and hope all these British farm animals have a moral compass and respect my property rights. Griffin's pig was a Berkshire, well known for rooting, and Lyman's fairly pathetic fence made for a bad combination. Numerous times he had to chase the pig away from his property, and he once angrily marched up to Griffin's home, saying, Hey, British farm idiot, keep your stupid pig out of my potatoes. It is up to you to keep your potatoes out of my pig.
Imagine that major conflicts can potentially erupt because of a stupid, lazy settler who shows up on land that doesn't belong to him and takes the easiest route to settling that land. And suddenly you could spark a crisis between major governments.
Griffin was furious with his new American neighbors. They built their homes all over his sheep pastures. And besides, what right did they have to be here anyway? It was British territory. Lyman, on the other hand, swore the local government had assured him his land claims were legitimate, and so to him, the British were out of line. Look at that sick freak. In love with his pig. Isn't that just sick?
Yeah, what a freak.
Not like our love, Spuddy. Ours is all natural. Yep, just a man and his potato. Nothing wrong with that. But the tension between Lyman and Griffin was just about to explode.
And we'll stop right there. We are about halfway through the video. We'll come back tomorrow with part 2 and finish off this story. I hope you've enjoyed this so far. Stick around. Make sure you're subscribed if you're new to the channel so you don't miss it. I'll upload part 2 sometime tomorrow afternoon. Thanks for watching.